So, I will be discussing A Beautiful Mind, but more specifically, the mental illness that is portrayed throughout the movie. A Beautiful Mind is inspired by real events that happened in the life of a man named John Forbes Nash Jr. and is based off of a biography named A Beautiful Mind, written by Sylvia Nazar. Now, John Nash was a mathematical genius. He made an astonishing discovery early on in his career, and he was actually on the brink of international acclaim. Sadly, the handsome and very arrogant John Nash found himself on a painful and narrowing journey of self-discovery. Nash begins to experience intense stress and put into extremely difficult and dangerous situations when he is given the opportunity to work for the government on a top secret mission. However, the audience soon finds out that none of it is real. He is then diagnosed with schizophrenia. Because of this diagnosis, he is placed into a psychiatric hospital and is then given the therapy and medication that he needs in order to be able to calm his hallucinations and other symptoms that come along with his schizophrenia. Unfortunately, it is soon discovered that his unique mind was actually a huge reason as to why he was so smart and was able to process things so quickly compared to everyone else. So in a sense, his schizophrenia was his beautiful mind. So he begins to stop taking his medication, and it becomes apparent to the people around him. So they decide together that it would be better for him to instead be equipped with the tools in order to ignore his hallucinations so that he can go on and be as successful as he was before starting treatment for schizophrenia. Because of this decision, he is then given a Nobel Peace Prize for the discoveries and ideas that he created, as well as his inspiring story. At the beginning of the movie, it becomes apparent to the audience that Nash is extremely socially awkward, and the things he said could be considered very deviant, whether that be to peers or classmates, or later on in his career, his co-workers, as well as his wife. His life became incredibly dysfunctional once he began hallucinating people, as well as a top secret government job. That is where the most dysfunction in his life comes from, was the job. Unfortunately, because of his schizophrenia and the symptoms that came along with that, his marriage began to go downhill rapidly, which not only caused dysfunction for himself, but also for his wife and child. Nash started to feel distress once he realized that not only was his wife slipping away, but also his entire career that he worked so hard for, as well as his dreams and ambitions. He was more focused on his hallucinations and more worried about them than the things that actually mattered, like his family and his career. His abnormal behavior and mental processes were not only dangerous to himself, but also extremely dangerous to the people around him. In one scene in the movie, we find him on a high-speed car chase with his hallucinations. So the things that were the reason for this incredibly dangerous and stressful car chase were not real, and they were all in his head. Another reason that his schizophrenia was very dangerous was because he also let his hallucinations and delusions be the reason that he almost kills his baby, as well as shoving his wife into a wall and injuring her. That must have been so incredibly traumatizing for the wife and the child, and also for John Nash, because he doesn't understand why he's doing this, and he doesn't understand why people don't get him, and that just is so heartbreaking. I believe that the DSM-5 diagnosis that best fits John Nash is obviously schizophrenia. Nash sadly struggles with almost every criteria listed under the DSM-5's diagnosis for schizophrenia, everything from hallucinations to diminished emotional expression. It is so heartbreaking to watch him go from a person who is slightly able to express his feelings just enough to the point where he falls in love and gets a wife. Then as the movie progresses and it comes to the climax, he can barely speak his mind and can barely express just how he's feeling, and it is so sad to see. I believe that the best perspective or view that most accurately describes or explains schizophrenia is the biological view. I believe that the biological view is the best way to explain schizophrenia because it not only looks at the certain person's brain activity and abnormalities, but it also focuses on the family's history with this illness. The approach explains that the more closely related someone is the more closely related the person is to someone with this disorder specifically, or any mental illness in general, the more likely they are to develop one as well. In addition to looking at the family's pedigree in regards to this disorder, the biological approach also believes that some people inherit a predisposition to this disorder and has the ability of developing it later on when faced with extreme stress or trauma. The stress can be in the career or in the personal life, and the trauma can be abuse or an accident. Anything like that can trigger it inside of somebody's brain. I believe that the best ways to treat schizophrenia is to either prescribe a drug that will help with the specific type of schizophrenia that the certain patient is dealing with. But you have to be careful because certain medications, if prescribed to someone with negative symptoms, could almost make those symptoms worse. So the doctors have to be incredibly careful and diligent in making sure that they prescribe the correct medication. Another treatment option that I believe is extremely helpful for someone dealing with schizophrenia is inpatient therapy, in order to equip the patient with coping mechanisms as well as tools in order to either fight or just ignore the hallucinations and delusions and be able to live a semi-normal life. I believe my diagnosis of schizophrenia is valid because Nash falls under most, if not all, of the criteria that the DSM-5 associates with schizophrenia. Although we are never introduced to Nash's family, there is a strong possibility that mental illness, whether it be depression, anxiety, or specifically schizophrenia, any kind of mental illnesses, it's a strong possibility that it runs in his genes or his family line. Another reason I strongly believe the biological perspective is the best way to describe schizophrenia based off of A Beautiful Mind is the fact that his schizophrenia doesn't become apparent until he is at a very stressful point in his life. Because teaching on its own is incredibly stressful and so much work. But then you add someone who is very socially awkward and doesn't enjoy talking to other people, that can be so detrimental and stressful to somebody like that. And so that just, like I said before, it definitely unlocked it in him. And then his hallucinations caused him to imagine a extremely stressful job that puts him in dangerous situations, and that almost propelled his symptoms even worse, as well as his hallucinations. Unfortunately, as far as treatment goes, I think we still have a long way to go. I think because of how delicate and life-changing this disorder can be, we are not at the point when it comes to treatment where we need to be. However, the two options that I discussed before, I believe, are the best way of treating someone with schizophrenia. Thank you for watching. I know you had to watch it, but I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a very happy Thanksgiving. I know you probably won't watch it before Thanksgiving, but